We're diving into Pro Bowl history, which teams have the most Pro Bowlers ever, and the craziest snubs of all time. Welcome back to Life in the Stands. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're really excited to talk about the current Pro Bowl rosters here in 2025, that Pro Bowl game coming up before the Super Bowl, as well as some interesting things in Pro Bowl history, the highest and least scoring games, which players have been snubbed the most, and also just some general trends with teams that have the most Pro Bowlers in NFL history. With that, Bender, we're going to talk first right away about the 2025 Pro Bowl rosters. Seems like there's quite a few snubs this year. Maybe that's recency bias. Maybe feels like there's more snubs this year than any other year, but it's probably about the same. I'm going to start by throwing out a name, Kirby Joseph, because the dude had 83 tackles and 9 picks, didn't get selected to the Pro Bowl. I know there's some talk about him potentially being like a dirty player. He does hit low, and I think that that might come into the fan voting because fans see that kind of stuff, and maybe that's why a guy doesn't get as many votes. But I'm sure you have snubs on your mind too. Throw out a name as well. And what are your thoughts on a guy like Kirby Joseph not making the Pro Bowl?
Yeah, I think it pretty much is all what you just said. I think it's his reputation of hitting low and the dirty moves and everything like that. However, there's always snubs no matter what sport you're talking about. And recently, obviously, like the NBA All-Stars were just announced as well. They're going to talk about snubs there. Thankfully enough, there's a bunch of Pro Bowlers in the NFL that are either injured or don't want to participate, allowing some of the other guys that would be snubbed to get in. Baker Mayfield was one of them, who was a late ad, I believe, a couple of days ago. But one that is kind of shocking to me is Brian Thomas Jr. He ended up being and emerging as the number one receiver in Jacksonville, and he put up crazy numbers for a rookie.
He was third in the NFL in receiving yards. And real quick, before I jump more into that, I'm glad you brought up NBA All-Star as well. There is a TikTok series that Jake is putting out, so make sure you'll go and pay attention to that. Go let him know if you disagree or agree with the snubs he's putting out on the NBA side. Back to Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, I mean, the dude was third in the NFL in receptions. He had a crazy yards per catch rating as well, and then 10 touchdowns as a rookie. And he's doing this all on a pretty dysfunctional Jaguars team. So I think his future is very, very bright. And as a rookie on the AFC side, it feels like he probably should have made it.
If you're going to have a guy like Drake May or a guy like Brock Bowers make the Pro Bowl roster with the seasons that they had, like Brock Bowers set up for success for the rest of his career now. Like he is already emerging himself into the top 5 tight end category.
Yep.
Not Pat Freiermuth, by the way. And Brian Thomas Jr. should be right up there with him. Those were the two guys we talked about all season long, and Bowers gets in, but he doesn't.
Right. Yeah, something needs to change there. And in general, like the fan voting in general, we talked real briefly about Kirby Joseph not making it because of potentially some of the reputation there. You also have a guy like Russell Wilson, who's going to be a replacement in the Pro Bowl this year. Before we hopped on the show, we were talking about Snoop Huntley, who made it for the Ravens a couple years ago, where he played literally like 3 or 4 games. So something does need to happen with the fan vote. Something needs to happen with the Pro Bowl in general, much like the NBA All-Star game. But before we jump into that, let's talk real quick about the teams that have the most Pro Bowlers in NFL history. And you do have all that shit in your background, the blue and silver disgusting looking things that you make me look at every time we do this podcast. But the Cowboys do have the most Pro Bowlers in NFL history. They have 542. Packers, Steelers, Niners, and the Redskins, now the Commanders, round out the top 5. Part of me is not surprised, Bender, just because these are the teams that have kind of been around the longest.
Listen up, though. Let me have my wins because I'm taking a lot of losses lately with the Dallas Cowboys that I don't want to talk about. But if you think about it, these are the teams that have gone on Super Bowl runs for the most part, so you're expected to have Pro Bowlers on those phenomenal teams, championship run teams.
Dynasty-type teams.
Yeah, so it doesn't really surprise me. I think the biggest surprise here is that there's not a whole lot of New England Patriots.
Yeah, maybe a slightly newer dynasty there in New England. And I think a lot of unsung hero guys. Like, I think of, how many Pro Bowls did Wes Welker, or not Wes Welker, but Rex Burkhead ever make? Yeah, how many Pro Bowls did I mean, like, but how many guys like that are there, right? That like helped them win all those Super Bowls. So
LeGarrette Blunt is one that I think
like
of
Garrett Blunt,
immediately.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like Garrett Blunt for real. I wonder if he's ever made some Pro Bowls, but yeah, I mean, kind of interesting. Obviously, the longevity is part of it. These franchises have been around for a long time, but also, like you said, they're successful franchises. You got the Cowboys with 5 Super Bowls, and obviously a dynasty there in the '80s, and they've always been good to great, depending on the year. Right? It's hard to find a down year, even though they were this past year. Yeah, obviously the Packers, Steelers, Niners, all with what top 5 in championships and Super Bowls. The Niners kind of controlled the 90s. The Steelers kind of controlled the '70s. Like you almost got like back-to-back decades there. I guess it is reasonable to wonder then, it feels like the 2000s twins kind of run by the Patriots. Maybe they're creeping up. I only looked up top 5. Maybe they're creeping up.
Might be something to look into. It's kind of interesting that Washington's up there for a team that isn't as successful in regards to Super Bowls. So
Mm-hmm. They've been around for forever though, if you think about it.
this is true.
Yeah, I mean they've been
Depends on
around.
when you date it back, of course.
Right, exactly. And it even makes me think now we're going into an era where like if the Chiefs three-peat this year, are we looking at like the Chiefs catching up in this race of total Pro Bowl players, or even the Ravens at that point? Just because the Ravens have they have like 12 selected this year or something, they stay at that
Yeah.
pace.
Yeah, and they had what their Super Bowl run with Flacco, and they're basically I want to call it like a dynasty defense.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be
Yep.
there too. I agree.
Yep. Yep. But let's move on here. Let's talk about some general Pro Bowl kinds of things, looking back and looking into the future. The lowest scoring Pro Bowl in NFL history took place in 1987. It was the AFC at 10 and the NFC at 6. So there was 16 total points scored. There was like a real game back then. The MVP was Reggie White, to give you an idea of how the game went. In a Pro Bowl, the
Damn.
MVP was Reggie White.
Damn.
Flash forward to 2024, and you had the most points scored in NFL history in a Pro Bowl, NFC 64, AFC 59. So one of the first years of flag football in the Pro Bowl. Now tell me, Bender, which game would you have rather watched?
Not the 10-6 game. I think
Really?
that's how we're, I think that's how we're trending in a lot of sports. A lot of people want to see offense, right? And I also like the format of flag football anyway because I think it's safer for the players. I don't want to see a guy tear an ACL in a game that's just for fun. Obviously, you want like incentives behind it, so there is competition. That's why there is an issue in the NBA currently as well. So as long as there's incentive there to at least compete in a game of flag football, I'm okay with it. And I'm also okay with it if it's going to be included in the Olympics. So we need to get better at playing actual flag football so we can smoke everybody else whenever it enters the Olympics.
Well, I don't think offense is going to be an issue in flag football, but my question is, as defenders, where is the pride? Where is any of the pride? But I guess maybe that's where I'm just from a defensive perspective too, because I'd much rather watch that 1987 game. Reggie White is the MVP. The guy must have put on a clinic. It must have been incredible to watch.
And it's honestly a cool mindset. We're never going to get that again. I don't think the mindset of like, I don't care if I get hurt, I'm going to go out here and ball a little bit.
Uh huh.
We're not going to get that.
For the love of the game, but also, I mean, think about where the contracts and everything probably were back then. I mean, those guys were playing football because they really loved it too. I mean, sure, they were probably making like good money, like very good money for the time, but it's not like they were making what players are making now with just the minimums and everything. So different time period. I like what you said with the mindset too. Just a very different mindset.
Or if you're Kirk Cousins and get hurt, you still get paid hundreds of millions of dollars.
For the safety of all Atlanta Falcons fans, we're going to move on. Let's finish out the episode today, Jake, with some biggest Pro Bowl snubs. 2 running backs here. And I think I'd like to point out that it's been like not just the last couple years, like running backs have always kind of been like underappreciated, I think, in the game of football. Um, I think everybody assumes it's an easy position, like you take the ball and you run with it. There's a lot of nuance to playing running back. Like there's a lot of vision and like setting up your cuts, setting up your blockers, knowing how to manipulate tacklers and a defense based off where your eyes go and your body moves. So I think running backs in general need to have more respect. We got 2 snubs at running back. I'll let you take the first one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to name DeAngelo Williams first because I enjoyed watching him back in 2008 and then some, actually, with the Carolina Panthers. He had about
And the
50.
Steelers.
Calm down. The Steelers don't count ever in my mind. But no, he had about 1,500 rush yards and he had 18 touchdowns. How does a guy with 18 touchdowns not make it into a Pro Bowl?
Yeah, he added 2 in the air too, so 20 total touchdowns in the year.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Those numbers should stand out to people. Now, the only thing I can think of is maybe the fan vote, and you kind of mentioned about the fan vote anyway. So, like, how much pull does that have towards who gets named and who doesn't? Because D'Angelo Williams at 20 total touchdowns should should not even be a question, and he wasn't in it.
Well, so let me give you a scenario here. We just talked about this. Washington, been around for a long time, have a lot of fans, right? There's a little bit of a newer franchise, not a huge fan base in Carolina. Guess what running back was selected to the Pro Bowl above D'Angelo Williams? Think time period. I can tell you the number, and you would probably get it.
Nah, you got me lost.
26. Clinton Portis was elected to the Pro Bowl that year.
I thought he was before that time. I thought he was before
that
that
was Clinton Portis. So if you think about fan bases and fan vote, I mean, there was way more fan votes for Clinton Portis over D'Angelo Williams that year.
I mean, Portis is a dog, but shit, expand the roster.
Yeah, there you go. Bring more reserves. The other snub that we'll kind of round out the episode with is the great LaDainian Tomlinson. This dude had like close to 2,500 all-purpose yards in 2003. He had 1,600 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns on the ground. He had 100 catches. 100 catches and over 700 yards with another 4 touchdowns through the air. So 17 total touchdowns, like 2,500 total yards, 100 catches, and he did not make the Pro Bowl that year. He made the Pro Bowl the following year.
Oh, that was to make up for it. That had to be to make up for it. But that's like the full definition of putting a team on your back. The underappreciation, which I actually want to go back to, because I don't think people realize how much a good running back can actually translate to a winning team. And if you look at it this year, it almost makes me wonder why running backs aren't considered in MVP conversations either. Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley both doing their thing this year. Obviously, you got stud quarterbacks, but I think there needs to be something in regards to the voting, overall voting, that can kind of make it balanced for running backs to be able to win that award.
If the Eagles win the Super Bowl this year, I think it's incredibly difficult to make any argument against Saquon for MVP.
Exactly. If they win it, it's going to be because of him. That's the only way they've been winning anyway.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to watch. Really interesting to watch. This has been another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think the biggest Pro Bowl snubs of all time are and some of the top 2025 Pro Bowl snubs. And we'll see you on the next episode.